Welcome to the 18th episode of Heydorn and Watson on Douglas Social Credit. Today we will be talking about the relationship between Douglas Social Credit and work, which is a very hot topic. That's the value, purpose, and meaning of work and its relative importance to Douglas social credit, monetary reform, and society as a whole, and what role it has to play in human societies and with social credit reform in general. So we'll deal with the question of what is the purpose of work? How much work do we really need? And how often do people need to be working, and how many people need to be employed in order to supply all the necessary goods and services to the community or country with the least amount of trouble to everyone. So I'll put it over to you, Dr. Heydorn. What do you have to say on this?
Yes, well, I think one of the first things that we have to be clear about, because this is a source of common misunderstandings, is that social credit is not opposed to work. We're not against work. And social creditors are not against work. Why do I say that? Because you have to sort of define what is meant by work. And in the broadest sense, work is simply meaningful activity, right? And it takes so many forms. There are plenty of forms of work that people engage in, even in the current economic order, that are they don't qualify as paid employment or paid work. And so anything at all that involves purposeful activity, whether it's creative or not creative, could be classified broadly as a form of work. Right? So, apart from jobs or paid employment, working for an employer or being self-employed and working for the sake of obtaining an income, whether it's a profit, a wage, or a salary, you've got the work of mothers and fathers in the home. You've got hobbies could be considered a form of work under this definition. It's purposeful, meaningful activity. Volunteer activities, that's work. Reading or studying for the purpose of expanding one's knowledge, that's a form of work.
That's right.
Any sort of artistry, painting, learning a musical instrument, those are all, in this broadest sense, forms of work. Right?
Yes.
So we don't obviously people have to have meaningful things to do with their time. And, when we talk about leisure and valuing leisure, we're not talking about idleness. We're talking about having the freedom, the economic independence and freedom to choose increasingly for yourself how you profitably, meaningfully want to spend your time.
Yeah.
So we're not against work in that broad sense, and what we are against is an artificial necessity for paid employment that is not a fruit or not a requirement, a physical requirement of the existing economic order, but is something imposed by a dishonest, dysfunctional financial system. So it's we have a policy of full employment, and we have a situation where it's even been extended to women now, of course, whereas it wasn't 40, 50 years ago. Yeah. And this expectation that everyone should work in paid employment, it's not a physical necessity of the economic hardware, let's say. In fact, now, more than any other time in history, there's less of a physical necessity for all hands on deck in paid employment than ever before.
That's right.
And yet, because the financial system is so dishonest and so I suppose you could say, inverted, financially, all hands on deck has become more necessary now than ever before in history. So it's the financial system is actually projecting an image of the necessity for paid employment, which is the opposite of what the actual physical facts of the case would require.
Yeah,
right? It's an indictment against the existing financial system.
that's right.
So, at the level of technology we're at, we actually should be working less in paid employment and working more in things that we actually want to do for ourselves, whether that's artistic work or scientific work or volunteer work or domestic work or however it is that we want to meaningfully spend our time.
Absolutely, Oliver. It's just the irony of ironies now that in an age of modern of automation, of machines doing more and more of the work, requiring less human labor, it seems we have to, not just men, but then women now have to work more than ever, are forced to work more than ever, just to live. It seems absurd, and that is that policy, that artificial policy, that's of full employment, that is for both genders, is just so destructive towards society and the family and civilization, because it suppresses the creative impulse and deprives men and women of the precious time, leisure time they need to cultivate their family, spiritual family and cultural life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and all for the sake of a policy, just to keep the current financial system, artificial financial system, ticking over.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, that's the key point. And so, paid work in the sense of paid employment, has a meaning and a purpose and a value in the existing economic system, which is largely artificial, which is driven by financial requirements, which wouldn't be there if the financial system were honest and actually gave us an accurate reflection of our physical wealth and capacity to produce wealth. So so that was sort of the first sort of point that I wanted to make, is that we have to be clear when we talk about work. We have to be clear about what we mean by work. And social credit is by no means opposed to work in the sense of meaningful activity. That's a requirement of human beings. People have to have meaningful things to do, spend their time and their energy. Douglas recognized that. And but what we're saying is work doesn't have to be limited to paid employment. And
that's right.
Since paid employment, work in the formal economy, is physically less and less necessary, we need to, financially, socially, and culturally, we need to be broadening our horizons and start thinking in terms of all the quote-unquote work that people could take on that is outside the very narrow frame of productive work in an economic sense, paid employment in the formal economy.
Yeah, exactly. Wasn't it the Chinese philosopher Confucius who said that if one loves his job, then he will never have to work another day in his life.
Right, and so
it's a form of leisure for him.
Yes, so social credit actually would allow more and more people to love their work.
That's right.
Whether it's paid employment or it's not paid employment, it's work outside the formal economy. It would allow more and more people to actually love what they do, because they would be in a better position to freely choose what best suits them in terms of aptitude and family conditions and all the various factors that go into choosing a a state in life.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly right. So they have the freedom and the opportunity to choose the form of work that is most suited to them and their talents, dispositions, and needs.
Right.
Yeah.
And that would have all sorts of knock-on benefits for society. I mean, society would be stabler, people would be happier,
Yes.
and that would
Yeah.
reduce all sorts of problems that we,
It'd be
crime or delinquency or what have you.
Health.
Yes, people will
improve people's health.
That's right. That's right. So another sort of connected point here is that if we had social credit, if people were receiving a national dividend, even those people that were employed would have a different relationship to their work in comparison with the relationship that currently obtains. Why? Because if you're receiving a national dividend, that's a form of security, a form of independence. If you, as an employee, didn't like the work conditions were not suitable for you, or the remuneration you felt was not adequate. Maybe, if you're in a company, maybe it seems to you that other people, management, let's say, are being paid, or CEOs are being paid so much more, ridiculous sums of money more than what you're being paid, and you're doing sort of the grunt work. Well, the work, all workers, but particularly those that are in a weaker position now, would then find themselves in a new situation. The power dynamics would be changed because of the dividend. And so anyone who felt that they weren't being given a fair deal in the existing system would, if they had a dividend, they'd be able to say, okay, well, this isn't meeting my needs, or this isn't suitable for these reasons. And, if you can't offer a better deal, I can live on my dividend, right? I can opt out, and I can fall back on my dividend. So the dividend would enfranchise paid workers in a way that would strengthen their bargaining chips.
That's right. And their bargaining power.
That's right. And so, you wouldn't even require, let's say, as much state intervention, wage courts or other forms of government regulation. Simply by giving people a dividend, you change the power dynamics, and the market will function in such a way that the outcomes will tend to be fairer than they are now.
Yes, exactly. And that will be an enormous help to the worker, just the common worker, and to prevent or to protect him from abuse by malicious or unjust employers. Another thing I mentioned is how social credit, and thus the national dividend, could actually help work. It could actually augment work, could help certain forms of work that have fallen on the wayside or have been struggling, like, for example, cottage industries or domestic service, household servants, housekeepers, which have become unaffordable to the vast majority of people now, unlike in the past. If everyone's receiving a dividend, part of at least a greater part of their living costs are covered, stabilized by the national dividend, and so that people working in cottage industries or in domestic service can be paid for their work, but at a reasonable rate for both the employer and the employee.
So, in other words, what you're saying is a national dividend would actually help to revive certain forms of work that have been priced out of the market.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think that's a legitimate
those
point.
sorts of industries would be very still be very valuable, very helpful to families and society and the general culture today.
Right.
So,
yeah. Another point that we might make is this, as we were talking about this earlier before we started the program. Some people object to the national dividend because they see it as sort of universal welfare, and oh, look at the people who are on welfare now, they're lazy and they don't do anything, and we'll just sort of have society of idlers and things like this. And apart from the fact that, as we've explained before, the national dividend is indexed to productivity. So if too many people don't work in paid employment, there'll be less production and the dividend will distribute less, thus indicating a need for greater labor input. So the dividend is not fixed, it's not guaranteed, it depends how much the society actually produces. Apart from that, the point that I wanted to make in connection with social credit and work is that one of the things that makes people quote unquote lazy under welfare is that very often there isn't sufficient incentive for them to take risks or to try to gain income on the side, because they might lose their welfare benefits.
That's right.
And so it sort of puts them in a situation where a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Why sort of take the risks of trying to get off welfare if it's not certain that one will be in a better position long term? I mean, most new businesses fail.
That's right.
One could get education and then may not be able to get a job with whatever education one's got. And so there is this idea, well, at least with the welfare, I've got this securely. Why rock the boat? Maybe I'll just stay put with what I've got, because at least I've got it, and I don't want to risk sort of losing all or part of the benefits for something that may not be as secure.
That's right. Exactly.
And so I think with the dividend, of course, everyone gets it, and there's no risk of losing it.
Yeah.
Right. So as long as there's a societal profit, it will be distributed to everybody.
Yep.
And so there's not this situation of where there's an incentive not to better myself because I might actually end up losing the benefit. No, everyone gets the dividend, and you are free to build on it and to do whatever you want with it to further increase or enhance your income or whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that should reassure people.
The perfect point, Oliver, and couldn't have explained it any better. And another point I'll make with that is that because the dividend is distributed equally to everyone, it's obviously not means tested, and it's given to, as you said, given to everyone, each and everyone, as a societal profit, because each citizen is a shareholder in the nation's production. Unlike with welfare, where if someone is receiving welfare, it will either be because A, he cannot get a job or is unemployed, or B, he has a disability, a disability of some sort, the disadvantage that's preventing him from finding paid work. So the stigmas that are attached to receiving welfare payments, the psychological and social stigmas, would be completely absent from the national dividend, because everyone receives it, and it's a societal profit that citizens receive as shareholders, and as you said, like what you said, the dictum "he that shall not work shall not eat" still applies to the national dividend in a social credit economy, because as you said, the national dividend is tied to productivity. If we have too much mass idleness laying about, everyone just quits work, you'll lose the dividend. It will reduce, it will tank, and it will disappear. Unless people will be forced, they'll have to go back to work.
Right. One of the things, too, that people raise when you talk about welfare is, they object to having to work and being taxed to support people that are not working. And the beauty, of course, of social credit is that the dividend is not tax financed. It's financed through money creation, through the creation of debt-free credit, involves monetary reform. So the dividend that everyone gets, it's not through any sort of redistribution. And that should be a few marks in its favor, I think, in terms of those that are, object to welfare recipients, because once we introduce a national dividend, those people that are being taxed to support those in welfare will no longer be taxed to support people that way. And we'd actually, from that point of view, that sort of conventional right-wing point of view, we would all be better off.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And there wouldn't be this class distinction or this class war where you've got people working who are being taxed to support those who are not working. Rather, everyone, whether working or not, is going to receive this dividend. And this dividend doesn't rob Peter to pay Paul. So, even those, I guess what I'm saying is, the objections that people make to welfare, if they're honest about those objections, should actually make them in favor of a national dividend as a better alternative.
Absolutely. Well, they already ironically in the U.S. state of Alaska, they're already receiving, the citizens already receive dividends, and that is from the nation's oil profit, or from the state's oil profits. So they receive free dividends. So, and that itself is, itself is, you would think is sort of you'd think would be quite a economically right-wing idea, receiving a profit from a business.
Right.
That is the state or the nation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to consider with this whole theme of social credit, work, welfare, and how the social credit society would in many ways resolve the typical objections and problems that people have with regard to work or welfare and their intersection. Is there anything else that you think we should mention when it comes to social credit and work? I mean, I know one thing is, we've been talking about the objection of idleness, but there are some people, it's not true of everyone, but there are some people who, when they retire, actually find themselves to be busier than they were when they were working.
Yeah. That's very true.
So
I know some people who are retired, they just can't sit still.
Yeah.
They're always doing something. They're working on their house, they're working on their cars, or pursuing some sort of hobby. They're building something, repairing something, or doing some sort of hobby or volunteer work. Yeah.
Right.
There's many all manner of bountiful things to do outside the world of formal paid work, that's for sure.
Yeah. And insofar as some retired people may just lounge about and not spend too much time in meaningful activity, watching television or what have you, you'd have to investigate it thoroughly. But I suspect that apart from age, I think age could be a factor there. But apart from that, I think when you spend your whole working life usually working under direction in a very oppressive financial environment, it may so stifle your creative energies that by the time you're done, you've been so conditioned to do something that maybe you didn't quite value for the sake of someone else, just so that you can get a paycheck, that you've lost the ability to direct yourself. You've lost the ability to make meaningful use of your own time because of that sort of brutalization that's gone on over decades.
That's what it is. Literally, what it is: brutalization.
Mm.
Yeah, it's it's the destruction of man, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and I think that's a good place to finish, a good point to finish on, because essentially what we're saying is, in a social credit society, work would be something that people do for their own sort of advancement. In other words, in this relationship between the human person and work should serve the human person. The human person shouldn't be serving work or the demands of a working world that is that are largely artificial in nature because of dysfunctional finance. So we want a situation where there's the greatest amount of true freedom possible, where people can use work to enhance their well-being and are not slaves to work.
Yeah, exactly. So we live, we work to live. In other words, we don't live to work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And social credit would make that possible. That would be the proper relationship, the proper psychological and metaphysical relationship between human beings and work.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to understand how anyone could not be in favor of it, and be arguing instead for servility and enslavement and
slavery
and subordination of the human person to work.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I think we'll sign off there. We might find some interesting articles that we'll link to in the description. Please subscribe. Thank you for watching, and feel free to comment. And we will catch you next week for another episode of Heydorn and Watson.
All right.
Thank you very much, Michael. Take care.
Thank you very much to Oliver. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.